Hello and welcome to our 5th vocabulary focus video. This one is one of my favorites, student responses, so I'm so excited to share all of the information with you today. Student responses. Why is it so important to have frequent student responses? Well, here are 4 fantastic reasons. First, it contributes to a positive learning environment. Second and third kind of go together. It embeds formative assessments into your lessons, and it has you checking for student understanding. Fourth, it promotes learning. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each of these. First, the positive learning environment. For those student responses, these things are seen because of them. It increases engagement, increases on-task behavior, increases accountability for all of the students in your room, promotes desired behaviors, reduces inappropriate behaviors, and it keeps the class moving along. As Anita Archer says, keep the pace perky, not pokey. And you'll be listening to a lot of quotes from Anita Archer because this presentation is based very heavily on her book, Explicit Instruction. So here's a quote to kick us off. Everyone says it, everyone writes it, everyone does it. Learning is not a spectator sport. For our second and third, I kind of combine them because they're very similar. Embedding formative assessment and checking for understanding. Here's what happens in these categories. It allows teachers to monitor understanding. It adjusts the lesson based on the responses. And it provides instant feedback to students. So you can see if you need to change your lesson or if you need to pull out students for those that are having trouble with the core Tier 1 instruction. Here's another quote from Anita Archer. Walk around, look around, talk around. She's talking about teachers in the classroom during this instruction. When you have student responses and you're doing explicit instruction, we should be walking around the room, making sure that we are in proximity to a lot of students, not just at the front. Looking around the room, making sure that you're noticing all students to see if they are understanding. And third, talking around. And that means around to everyone, not just talking to those students who offer their hand and want to talk to you. Finally, it promotes learning. It focuses students' attention on the critical content, provides practice of skills, strategies, and facts, provides rehearsal of information and concepts, and allows for retrieval practice of critical content. Now, this next quote is one of my favorites from Anita Archer. There are no reported instances of children dying from practice. Practice is something that definitely needs to happen in the classroom. For us to become proficient in something, we need to practice, practice, practice. And by putting student responses into our lessons, that shows that we are putting practice into our lessons as well. Here are some guidelines for response rates as you're doing student responses during a lesson. 30% of all student responses should be individual responses. These should be non-volunteer. More on that later. 70% of your student responses should be unison responses, all saying, all writing, or all doing the same thing. Here are the different categories of our responses. We have simple, more complex, and then very complex. I'll break these down a little bit for you. The yellow, which is simple, these should be happening 3 to 5 times per minute. Students should have opportunities to respond a simple, quick response 3 to 5 times during your explicit lesson. These are things such as unison choral responses, gestures with their hands or their bodies, or response cards that they hold up quickly. The second one, which is more complex responses, should be happening once per minute, given an opportunity for students to respond, such as partner sharing or a quick written answer. Finally, the very complex should only happen one time per 10 to 30 minutes. These are things like writing for a prompt or completing an experiment. As you see the graph here, I graphed a 30-minute lesson and how each of these responses should look for the amount that they're given. The simple responses for a 30-minute lesson should be at least 90 opportunities. That's 90. For a more complex, which is the partner sharing, this should be happening 30 times in a 30-minute lesson. And for the very complex, just one time. Here are some types of responses if you're kind of questioning, well, okay, I'll put some student responses in my lessons, but what can I do? At the top are some categories, and then underneath are some examples of things in those categories. So we have verbal, such as partners or discussion, written, such as whiteboards, actions, such as gestures, inclusive passage reading, such as partner reading, or technology, such as using your interactive board. You can read the rest of those, and if you'd like more explanation or don't understand what it is, then shoot me an email or find me out to chat. Don't forget about think time. Think time is huge for our students. A lot of times we want to speed things up a little bit, but we need to remember to slow it down. A good rule of thumb is to add 3 seconds to what you think is enough time. So what I liked to do is answer the question in my own mind, but then add 3 more seconds so the student could come up with their answer in their mind and be ready to answer it to me. So here are a couple of examples of some student responses. First, structured choral responses. When should we use choral responses? There are 3 times. First, when answers are short and the same. You don't want to use choral responses if all of the answers are going to be different. Second, use when recall and rehearsal of facts are desired. If you want students to recall information they've already learned or rehearse information that they've just learned, then use choral responses. Finally, use for quick review of information. So here's an example of a choral response. These are 4 steps that you need to do during a choral response. First, you're going to ask the question. Then you're going to put up your hands to indicate silence or whatever other symbol you have. Then you'll give think time. And then you'll lower your hand and say everyone. So here's how this would work in a classroom. Let's say that I was coming in to teach a lesson and I wanted them to understand how to respond to me in a choral setting. I would have them know that they're not going to answer me right away. They're going to look for a signal. I'd explain that first. Then I would do the following. First is ask the question. Boys and girls, I want to know what grade you're in. I would promptly put my hands up to indicate that these students should not be shouting out at me. They should be thinking about the answer in their head and being ready to formulate the answer to me. Then I'd give them ample thinking time. Remember, always plus 3 seconds, then you think that's enough time. And then I would say everyone, and then they would respond with what grade they're in. Again, are you realizing that I'm stressing the think time here? Make sure you provide adequate think time. Always add 3 seconds to what you think is enough time. If students don't respond, or if they blurt out, we're going to repeat with a gentle redo. We're not going to get mad at them. We're not going to get frustrated because it's probably going to be what they want you to do. You're just going to have them say, oh, that's not quite right. Let's try it again. And you would repeat everyone. And you're going to do this as many times as you need to, because the students need to know that the routine that you're setting up is not going to be swayed by anything that they do. The second example is structured partner response. When to use a partner response? 3 times. Use it when your answers are long, use it when your answers are different, or use it for foundational and higher order thinking questions. Things that will take a little bit of time for them to formulate their answer. Here's an example. This one has 6 steps. So you have your partners already put together in your classroom. Maybe they move for vocabulary or they move for comprehension or whatever you're going to do. Remember to keep switching up your partners 3 to 6 weeks so they don't get stuck with the same person. First, you're going to ask a question or present the partnership with a task. Second, you're going to give them thinking time. There's that thing again, thinking time. You want this to happen before they turn and talk, because a lot of times when they turn and talk, they are not ready to turn and talk. They need some quiet thinking time to think in their brain and formulate a response before talking to their partner. Third, you want to scaffold your response with a sentence starter. A lot of times our students struggle to get their thoughts into a complete sentence. So giving them a sentence starter to start with will help to get them on the right foot. Number 4, have students share answers with their partner using the sentence starter. This also is going to help them formulate a correct answer. Number 5, you're going to call on a student to give that answer, but it does not stop there. Number 6, choose an after response option. You're going to do one of these 4 things, or you can think of something else to do to interact with that student. First, you're going to provide feedback. Second, you could have the students indicate agree or disagree. Third, you could call on another student to repeat or summarize what the previous student said. Or you're going to discuss the answer with the class. Make sure when you are giving partners student responses that both partners have a job. If you just have one person sharing and the other person listening is not going to get much out of it. Maybe you'll have the first partner share and then the second partner will turn and share to the class, or something like that. Next is individual turns. Now, these are these questions that we ask our students, and usually we like to see hands raised. We say, oh, raise your hand. But I want you to challenge yourself and limit calling on volunteers. Here are 2 reasons why we should limit calling on volunteers. First, I'm reading this real quick. First, specific students volunteer. Usually these are the students that are high-performing students. These are your assertive students in class, or these are students that are proficient in English. Now, when I say proficient in English, it doesn't mean the English language learners. This might be a normal English-speaking student in your classroom, but maybe they have a speech impediment and they're a little nervous to talk in front of other students, so they're not going to volunteer their hand. Second, over time, other students don't think or don't participate because they know that Johnny over there is going to raise his hand and I'm not going to have to answer it because Johnny's got it. Here's how to not rely on volunteers. 3 things you can do. First, use equity sticks. These are simple popsicle sticks that you write the student's name on and have a bucket in your room ready to go. Second, you can use a class checklist. I'm sure you all have class lists around. Put it into a little wipe-off sleeve and check as you go. Third, you can use round the room. I like to always keep it a secret and start with one person and then just make a mental note that, okay, I'm going to go this way around the room and you're going to be next. Limit calling on inattentive students. Sometimes teachers like to call on inattentive students to get their attention back to the lesson. But here are 4 reasons why we should not do that. First, you may humiliate or embarrass them. If I were a student in class and I got caught not paying attention, I know I would turn beet red and be so embarrassed. Number 2, inattentive students are unlikely to have a correct response, so it's probably going to hurt your classroom discussion. Number 3, answers of inattentive students are unlikely to add to the richness of class discourse. Your discussion is not going to be added to with the response from this student. Number 4, you're giving attention to the inappropriate behavior. We all know we should ignore. It's harder than it is, isn't it? Here's how to regain attention. 3 ways. Use physical proximity. If you see a student is dazing off or not paying attention, use your body to walk closer to them. Maybe even tap their desk or give them a little rub on the shoulder to let them know that you're present and they need to be present too. Number 2, give directive to the entire class. Maybe have them pull out their notebooks or raise their hand or do something like that. It kind of ties into the next one too. Ask students to complete quick physical behavior. I always like the stand up, turn around 2 times and sit back down because it all gets them up, refocused, and ready to learn. Now I wanted to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Anita Archer. Avoid the void, for they will fill it. Anytime there is a time in your classroom that is unstructured, you know what your students are going to do. They're going to fill it with something that probably you don't want them to fill it with. Maybe they're going to be talking with their friends or throwing paper airplanes. But anytime you have a spot in your lesson that is not quite planned out, or you're going, oh, wait, should I respond with this? Or what question should I respond with for them? Then they're going to know that you're off your game and they're going to fill that time with what they want to do. I think I said this earlier, but this presentation was very heavily based on the Explicit Instruction book from Anita Archer and Charles Hughes. If you have not read this book, I highly, highly suggest it. It is very, very good. I would love to do a book study on this. Maybe it'll be our next one. But if you don't have it, seek it out and your teaching career will be changed. Explicit Instruction by Anita Archer. As always, if you have any questions, comments, want to learn more, or need anything at all, you can email me, call me, or just stop me in the hallway and I'll be happy to help.